Letting go of someone you once cared about is one of the hardest emotional battles a human being can face. It isn't just about losing a person. It's about losing the version of yourself that existed with them. Your mind becomes a battlefield filled with memories you didn't ask to remember, feelings you didn't choose to feel, and thoughts that return at the exact moment you wish they wouldn't. You lie awake replaying conversations, trying to understand where things went wrong, searching for meaning in silence and wishing your heart would move on as quickly as your mind tells it to. But the truth is, letting go is not a switch you can flip. It's a slow, deep, internal process, one that demands courage, clarity, and an entirely new way of seeing your own life. And this is exactly where Stoicism becomes your greatest ally. Because while pain is universal, suffering is something the Stoics believed we have control over. They taught that emotional detachment isn't about becoming empty or cold. It's about learning to live in a state where your peace is no longer held hostage by someone else's actions, decisions, or presence. When you hear the word detach, you may imagine shutting down, avoiding emotions, or pretending you don't care. But that's not Stoicism. Stoic detachment is something far more powerful. It is the art of staying centered while everything around you tries to pull you off balance. It's the ability to feel deeply without letting those feelings become your master. It's learning to look at a person you once relied on emotionally and say, "You no longer control the direction of my life." Think of Marcus Aurelius, sitting alone at night writing in his private journal. A journal never meant to be published, pouring out his reflections on loss, control, human nature, and the mind's ability to dominate pain. He understood something that most people today struggle with. We suffer more from our thoughts about a situation than from the situation itself. When you replay memories, when you analyze messages, when you try to interpret someone's silence or mixed signals, you are not dealing with reality. You are dealing with the mind's interpretation of reality. And the mind, when left unchecked, is the most dramatic storyteller in existence. It can turn a small moment into a meaning into a story, and a story into a chain that binds you to a future that no longer exists. The Stoics believed that detachment begins the moment you shift your attention from the uncontrollable to the controllable. You cannot control whether someone stays, whether they love you, whether they respect you, or whether they treat you the way you deserve. But you can control your response. You can control what you focus on. You can control the narrative you tell yourself. And most importantly, you can control the meaning you choose to attach to the ending of a connection. Emotional detachment, according to Stoicism, is not the absence of emotion, but the mastery of emotion. It is the decision to stop giving someone else the authority to shape your self-worth or dictate your inner state. It is the realization that your peace is too valuable to be left in the hands of someone who does not protect it. Think of how often you've lost yourself in worry, hope, fear, or expectation. How often you've allowed someone's inconsistency to disrupt your inner balance. How often you've placed your happiness in a place where it can be taken away. Marcus Aurelius would say this is the ultimate misalignment, because your peace should be rooted in something no one can touch, your own mind. Detaching emotionally doesn't mean forgetting the person or pretending the bond never existed. It means stepping back and seeing the situation clearly, without the fog of desire or attachment. It means acknowledging the role that person played in your life while accepting that their chapter may be closing. It means giving yourself permission to grow without them, to evolve without them, and to rebuild the parts of you that began to crumble the moment you started holding on to someone who had already let go. To detach is to reclaim your personal power. It is to say, I deserve a life where my emotions are not manipulated by uncertainty. I deserve peace that isn't interrupted by someone else's chaos. I deserve clarity more than I deserve temporary comfort, and you do. Today, inspired deeply by the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, we'll explore 15 Stoic rules that will help you loosen the emotional knots that keep you tied to someone who no longer aligns with your path. These rules are not just philosophical ideas. They are real, actionable steps that can reshape the way you deal with emotional attachment and guide you toward a healthier, stronger state of mind. Each rule is a reminder that you are not powerless, you are not broken, you are simply human, and humans are capable of incredible transformation when they choose to direct their thoughts rather than be directed by them. Stoicism doesn't promise that the process will be painless, but it promises that the pain will no longer control you. It promises that you will rise above your emotions instead of drowning in them. And it promises that, with discipline and clarity, you will eventually look back and realize that letting go wasn't the end of your story. It was the beginning of your evolution. So as you listen to these 7 Stoic principles, take them not as distant ancient teachings, but as practical tools for your modern emotional life. Let them guide you away from attachment, toward clarity, and finally toward freedom. The kind of freedom that Marcus Aurelius believed was the foundation of a resilient and unstoppable mind. Today, we start the journey of detaching not out of bitterness, but out of strength. Not out of anger, but out of self-respect. Not because you stop caring, but because you finally start caring for yourself. This is your turning point. This is your moment of clarity. Let's begin. Rule 1. Accept what you cannot control. One of the most powerful truths Marcus Aurelius ever wrote is this: you have power over your mind, not outside events. These words are simple, but they carry the entire weight of Stoic philosophy, and they hold the key to emotional detachment. When you're emotionally attached to someone, your mind naturally tries to control the situation. You replay conversations. You imagine different outcomes. You hope the person will change. You try to guess their feelings, predict their behavior, and influence their decisions. But no matter how much energy you invest, no matter how many sleepless nights you give away, the truth remains unchanged. You only control what happens inside you, never what happens outside you. This is where pain is born, not from the situation itself, but from the internal resistance to accepting it. The Stoics believed suffering begins the moment we demand life to be something other than what it is. When you want someone to stay but they are leaving, when you want someone to love you but they are conflicted, when you want someone to prioritize you but their actions show otherwise, you end up fighting a silent war that you cannot win, because you are trying to change the one thing the universe never granted you control over: another person. The moment you realize this, truly realize it, something inside you shifts. You begin to understand that clinging is not love, it is fear. And fear comes from believing that your peace depends on an external source. Marcus Aurelius lived an entire life surrounded by chaos: war, betrayal, political pressure, the deaths of people he loved. Yet the reason he stayed centered was because he repeated one truth over and over: I cannot control what the world does. I can only control what I think, say, and do. Emotional detachment begins here. You cannot control their choices. You can't make someone treat you better. You can't force them to respect you. You can't convince them to feel something they don't feel. You can't rewrite their past or reshape their future. You can offer kindness, love, vulnerability, honesty, but you cannot guarantee how it will be received. The moment you try to control those outcomes, you place your emotional well-being in someone else's hands. And that is where attachment turns into suffering. You cannot control their priorities. Maybe they say they care but don't show it. Maybe they pull you close one day and push you away the next. Maybe they are not ready, not healed, not stable, not committed. Whatever the reason, it belongs to them, not to you. You can give clarity, but you cannot force maturity. You can communicate, but you cannot create consistency. You can love deeply, but you cannot teach someone how to love you. The Stoics would say this is the exact point where detachment becomes necessary, not because you stop caring, but because you refuse to lose yourself in someone else's confusion. You cannot control the outcome of the connection. Maybe the relationship ends. Maybe it fades. Maybe it transforms. Maybe it teaches you something painful yet powerful. Whatever the outcome, trying to fight it, prevent it, or control it only deepens the wound. Stoicism teaches that the universe is constantly moving, pulling people together and pulling them apart. And your task is not to resist the movement, but to work with it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept the things to which fate binds you, and love the people with whom fate brings you together, but do so with all your heart." He didn't say to hold them forever. He didn't say to make them stay. He didn't say to lose yourself in the process. He said to love fully and accept reality fully, both at the same time. Why? Acceptance is emotional. Freedom. Acceptance doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It doesn't mean you weren't hurt. It doesn't mean the person was right or justified. Acceptance simply means acknowledging the truth without trying to reshape it. Because the moment you accept that you cannot control them, you regain control over yourself. You stop negotiating with reality. You stop waiting for their behavior to change. You stop expecting closure, apologies, consistency, or clarity. You stop placing your emotional balance in the hands of someone unpredictable. And most importantly, you stop suffering over a fantasy of what you hoped they would be. Acceptance is the quiet moment where your heart whispers, "I wanted things to be different, but they are what they are." And instead of fighting that truth, you breathe into it and let it guide you to the next chapter of your life. The illusion of control is what hurts you. Think about how much emotional pain comes from believing you can somehow change the outcome. If I love harder, if I wait longer, if I become better, if I fix myself, if I show my value, if I stay patient. But love is not a negotiation. Respect is not something you beg for. Consistency is not something you earn, and loyalty is not something you teach. When you try to control someone, you lose control of yourself. When you try to change them, you abandon the responsibility to change your own life. When you try to hold on to someone not meant for you, you let go of yourself. The Stoics would say, this is the greatest tragedy, not losing the person, but losing the parts of yourself you neglected trying to keep them. What you can control. If you cannot control them, what can you control? Your mindset, your boundaries, your focus, your response, your attention, your healing, your growth, your next step. You can choose to let go of expectations. You can choose to release attachment. You can choose to rebuild your self-esteem. You can choose to move forward with dignity and clarity. You can choose to protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does. Detachment begins with one decision. When you finally accept that you cannot control someone else, you open the door to peace. You step out of emotional chaos and into emotional intelligence. You stop reacting and start responding. You stop chasing and start observing. You stop hoping for change and start creating change internally. This is what Marcus Aurelius meant when he said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." If your ambition is to control someone, you will always be disappointed. If your ambition is to control your inner world, you will always be powerful. The moment acceptance happens, peace begins. You detach not because you don't care anymore, but because you finally understand the truth. You cannot carry the weight of a person who chooses not to meet you halfway. You release them so you can return to yourself. You accept what you cannot control so you can master what you can. Emotional detachment is not the end of love. It is the beginning of self-respect. It is the moment you stop trying to control someone and start controlling your own destiny. Rule 2. Observe your emotions, don't become them. One of the greatest teachings in Stoic philosophy, and one of the hardest lessons to practice in real life, is the idea that you are not your emotions. You experience them, you feel them, you carry them, but you do not become them unless you choose to. When you're emotionally attached to someone, your emotions feel overwhelming. You wake up with heaviness in your chest. You go through the day distracted by thoughts you didn't invite. You suddenly feel sadness in moments that should feel peaceful. You may feel hurt, confused, angry, hopeful, or nostalgic, all in the same hour. This emotional chaos makes you believe the feeling is you. That sadness means you're broken. That anxiety means you're losing control. That longing means you're still stuck. That anger means you're failing. But the Stoics teach the opposite. An emotion is just a visitor. It is not you. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You don't have to turn this into something. It doesn't have to upset you." He didn't say, "Don't feel it." He said, "Don't let it take over." Stoicism never asks you to suppress emotions. It asks you to witness them, to become an observer of your internal world instead of a prisoner inside it. The storm is real, but you are not the storm. Imagine a storm passing through the sky. The sky doesn't try to stop the storm. It doesn't panic. It doesn't assume the storm will last forever. It simply lets the storm pass. You are the sky. Your emotions are the storm. The problem is, when someone hurts you or leaves your life, you stop seeing yourself as the sky. You start believing you are the storm. Unstable, messy, unpredictable, drowning in your own memories. You let emotion dictate your identity, your behavior, your decisions. But emotions were never meant to control you. They were meant to strengthen you by passing through you. When you observe your emotions instead of becoming them, you shift from "I am sad" to "I am experiencing sadness." I am angry to "there is anger moving through me." I am broken to "I am feeling brokenness right now." This small change in language creates a massive shift in power. Suddenly, you're no longer the emotion, you're the observer of it, and the observer is always stronger than the emotion. Every emotion has a life cycle. Stoicism teaches something incredibly useful. Emotions behave like waves. They rise, they peak, and they fade. No emotion, no matter how intense, is permanent. But it feels permanent when you attach to it, when you feed it with thoughts, when you replay the story that created it. Consider sadness. If you simply sit with sadness, observe it, breathe through it, it begins to soften. But if you attach to it, if you add thoughts like, "Why did this happen? What did I do wrong? How could they treat me this way? Maybe they'll come back." Sadness transforms into suffering. The emotion didn't hurt you. Your attachment to it did. Anger works the same way. If you observe anger, you feel tightness, heat, restlessness, and then it begins to dissolve. But if you become anger, if you let it dictate your actions, if you speak from it, react from it, or fuel it with memories, it grows into something destructive. Emotions are harmless waves until you try to ride them forever. The mind is a stage you choose, whether to act or watch. Think of your mind as a theatre. Emotions enter the stage: sadness, anger, longing, hope, regret, love, fear. The problem is, you often jump onto the stage and start acting with them. You let the script take over. You let the emotion define the story. Stoicism teaches you to take a different seat, the seat of the observer. You sit in the audience, watch the emotion appear, perform, express itself, and leave. You don't judge it. You don't push it away. You don't cling to it. You simply watch. This practice creates emotional distance, not avoidance, but awareness. It lets you feel without losing yourself. Your emotions are signals, not commands. One of the greatest misunderstandings about emotions is believing they tell you what to do. But emotions are not commands. They are signals. They are messages. They are information from the subconscious. Sadness signals that something meaningful mattered to you. Anger signals that a boundary was crossed. Longing signals that you held hope. Fear signals that something uncertain lies ahead. But none of these emotions come with instructions. None of them tell you who you are. None of them dictate your destiny. Emotions say, look at this. They do not say, become this. Marcus Aurelius wrote, see that you do not become carried away by the impression. In modern words, feel it, but don't let it hijack your identity. The problem is not the emotion, it's the over-identification. When someone hurts you, the emotion that arises is natural, but the moment you start creating thoughts around the emotion, that means I wasn't enough. That means they didn't love me. That means I'll never find someone else. That means something is wrong with me. That's when you become the emotion. The emotion was temporary. The thoughts made it permanent. Stoicism teaches a powerful method. Separate the feeling from the interpretation. Feel the sadness without telling yourself a story. Feel the anger without creating blame. Feel the longing without fantasizing about what could have been. Feel the fear without predicting disaster. When you observe the raw emotion without adding narrative, it becomes manageable, even peaceful. You are bigger than what you feel. Your emotions might be loud, but they are not stronger than you. They might influence you, but they cannot control you unless you surrender the driver's seat. You've survived every emotion you've ever felt, every heartbreak, every disappointment, every wave of sadness. This alone proves one thing: you are bigger than your internal storms. Stoicism wants you to remember that, to feel without drowning, to observe without collapsing, to hurt without losing your center, because the person who can observe their emotions is the person who can master their life. The gap between stimulus and response is where your power lives. Viktor Frankl, inspired by Stoic thought, said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose. Observing your emotions creates that space. Instead of reacting instantly, crying, texting, overthinking, panicking, you pause, you breathe, you feel the emotion rising, and instead of becoming it, you study it. That pause is where self-control begins. That pause is where detachment grows. That pause is where your new identity is born. Watch the emotion like a scientist, not a victim. Stoicism encourages you to take a neutral stance. Ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Where do I feel it in my body? How long does it last? What triggers it? What story am I attaching to it? What is the raw emotion without the thoughts around it? By observing emotion this way, like a scientist studying a reaction, you remove its power to overwhelm you. Emotion is temporary, but your identity is permanent. You will feel things. You will hurt. You will remember. You will long. You will grieve. All of that is human, but none of it defines you. You are the observer. You are the awareness behind the emotion. You are the one watching the storm pass, not the storm itself. When you master this rule, emotional detachment becomes not just possible, but natural, because the moment you stop becoming your emotions is the moment they stop controlling your life. Rule 3. Stop creating stories in your head. One of the most destructive habits the human mind has, especially when you're emotionally attached to someone, is its ability to create stories. Not just simple thoughts, but entire narratives filled with assumptions, predictions, fears, fantasies, and imagined outcomes that never truly existed. These stories feel real, they feel convincing, and they affect your emotions as if they were facts. But the Stoics warn that almost all unnecessary suffering comes from the stories we create, not the reality we face. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself, don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. He understood that the mind has the dangerous ability to turn a single moment into an entire tragedy, even when nothing has actually happened. When someone pulls away from you, the mind begins writing a script. They're losing interest. They found someone else. They don't care anymore. I must have done something wrong. But none of these thoughts are facts. They are emotional interpretations dressed up as truth. The mind loves drama, even when reality is quiet. Human beings hate uncertainty. The brain wants answers, closure, reasons, explanations, even if it has to invent them. When someone's behavior becomes inconsistent or unclear, your mind searches for meaning. And because it can't tolerate the unknown, it fills the gap with the most emotionally charged version of the story. This is why heartbreak feels more painful than the actual breakup. The relationship may end once, but the story you replay in your mind ends 1,000 times. You create scenes that never happened. You imagine conversations that never took place. You picture futures that were never real. You torture yourself with possibilities instead of facts. Stoicism teaches you to separate what you know from what you're imagining. This single skill can save you months of emotional suffering. Facts are neutral. Stories are emotional. Let's consider a simple example. Fact: they didn't respond to your message. That's it. That is the entire truth. Story: they're ignoring me. They lost feelings. They're out with someone else. They're done with me. They don't respect me. I knew this would happen. None of these are facts. They are emotional predictions disguised as reality. When you attach your worth to these imagined stories, you experience pain that the situation itself never created. This is why Stoicism teaches you to always return to facts, simple, clean, emotion-free facts, and stop letting your mind create unnecessary suffering. Imagination is powerful, but dangerous. The mind is a storyteller, and when you're emotionally attached, it becomes a dramatic storyteller. You imagine why they left, what they're thinking, how they feel, what they're doing, whether they miss you, whether it's your fault, whether you should have done something different. But the truth is, you don't know. You cannot know. You will never know unless they tell you. And yet you emotionally react to your guesses as if they were confirmed facts. This is why heartbreak feels unbearable. Not because of what happened, but because of what you imagine happened. The Stoics would call this suffering in advance. Why the mind creates stories. There are 3 major reasons. 1. The brain hates uncertainty. Uncertainty feels threatening. So the mind fills the void with assumptions, even negative ones, because having a painful story feels safer than having no story at all. 2. Attachment amplifies imagination. When you care deeply, your emotions color your perception. One unclear signal becomes a threat. One change becomes a catastrophe. One silence becomes rejection. The more attached you are, the more vivid the stories become. 3. The mind confuses emotion with evidence. If you feel insecure, the mind decides you must be in danger. If you feel abandoned, the mind assumes you are abandoned. But emotions do not equal truth. Stoicism teaches you to challenge this illusion. The Stoic method: break the story down. The Stoics used a method called objective analysis. It goes like this. Step 1. State only the facts. Step 2. Identify what you are adding emotionally. Step 3. Remove the story. Step 4. Respond with clarity, not imagination. For example, fact: they didn't call tonight. Story: they don't want me anymore. Stoic breakdown: you don't know that. All you know is, they didn't call. This awareness creates emotional distance and emotional freedom. Stories create pain. Facts create peace. When you force yourself to stick to the facts, something magical happens. Your mind becomes quiet. Your emotions stabilize. Your anxiety fades. Your attachment weakens. Your decisions become clearer. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is actually happening? Facts are simple. Facts are clean. Facts don't hurt you. Stories do. The story controls you until you let it go. Once you recognize that your mind is creating a story, You can separate yourself from the emotion attached to it. This is emotional mastery. This is the heart of Stoicism. Instead of becoming a slave to imagined fears, you become a witness. Instead of reacting impulsively, you respond intelligently. Instead of drowning in assumptions, you stay grounded in truth. This breaks emotional attachment faster than anything else, because most attachment is built on mental stories, not reality. Reality is always kinder than imagination. The mind loves worst-case scenarios, but in reality, most of the things you fear never happen. Most of the people you think about aren't thinking about you negatively. Most of the silence is not rejection. Most of the uncertainty is not danger. Your mind exaggerates pain. Reality rarely matches the drama your imagination creates. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment about them." This is the essence of Stoic emotional detachment. Your freedom begins. When the story ends, imagine how peaceful you'd feel if you stopped imagining what they think, what they feel, what they're doing, what went wrong, why they changed, what could happen, what you fear the most. Your mind would become light. Your heart would become steady. Your emotions would stop controlling you. This is Stoic freedom. The freedom that comes when you finally separate facts from fears and stop letting imaginary stories dictate your emotional reality. Rule 4. Practice voluntary discomfort. One of the most powerful tools for emotional detachment, according to Stoic philosophy, is something that might sound counterintuitive at first: voluntary discomfort. At first glance, it seems strange. Why would anyone deliberately make themselves uncomfortable? Why would someone choose to feel pain, hunger, or hardship when life already provides enough of it? But Marcus Aurelius and other Stoic philosophers understood a profound truth. The mind that learns to endure small hardships becomes strong enough to withstand the inevitable losses, disappointments, and emotional turmoil of life. Emotional attachment is often born from fear. Fear of loss, fear of loneliness, fear of rejection. We cling because we are afraid of the discomfort of separation, of heartbreak, of emptiness. We want comfort, certainty, and security, and we are willing to sacrifice our peace to maintain it. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. Freedom comes from mastering discomfort, not avoiding it. The principle of voluntary discomfort. Voluntary discomfort is the deliberate practice of stepping outside your comfort zone and exposing yourself to minor forms of difficulty. This could mean fasting for a few hours, taking cold showers, walking instead of driving, sleeping on a less comfortable bed, or practicing restraint in your desires. It is a conscious choice to feel mild pain or inconvenience, knowing it will strengthen your mind and spirit. Why would this help with emotional detachment? Because when you intentionally face discomfort, you train your mind to understand a vital truth. Pain is temporary, manageable, and not threatening to your existence. When real emotional discomfort arises, like the loss of someone you care about, you are better equipped to face it without panic or desperation. You realize that you can survive, you can endure, and you can remain whole. Marcus Aurelius said, "What stands in the way becomes the way." Every difficulty you voluntarily endure teaches you that the mind can rise above external circumstances. Emotional suffering no longer feels like a life or death situation. It becomes a challenge you are capable of handling. Fear is the root of attachment. Most emotional attachment comes from fear. We fear being alone. We fear emptiness. We fear change. And this fear drives clinging behavior, constantly checking messages, trying to control someone else, seeking reassurance, or holding on to relationships that no longer serve us. By practicing voluntary discomfort, you face fear directly, in small doses. You step into situations that provoke mild discomfort and remind yourself, "I can survive this. I can endure this. I am stronger than my fear." Over time, your mind becomes conditioned. You realize that the discomfort of being without someone, of accepting the end of a relationship, or of experiencing emotional pain is not unbearable. It is temporary. And that realization is liberating. You cling less because you no longer see discomfort as something to avoid at all costs. You see it as manageable, even natural. Voluntary discomfort strengthens resilience. Emotional resilience is not built in comfort zones. It is built in moments of challenge, adversity, and deliberate struggle. When you practice voluntary discomfort, you learn that you are capable of more than you imagined. You discover an inner strength that cannot be taken away by someone leaving, by rejection, or by heartbreak. This principle extends to all aspects of life. Consider a cold shower. For the first minute, your mind screams in protest. Your body shivers, your teeth chatter, your brain wants to escape. But if you stay, breathe, and endure, you not only complete the shower, you also prove to yourself that you can face something difficult and survive it. Now imagine applying this to emotional hardship. The same principle applies. When heartbreak comes, when someone leaves, when disappointment strikes, you endure. You breathe, you observe, you survive. And each time you endure, your emotional resistance grows stronger. You cling less because you trust your own capacity to withstand life's hardships. Detach through training the mind. Voluntary discomfort is not just about physical challenges. It is about mental and emotional conditioning. You can practice by exposing yourself to situations that provoke mild discomfort in thought, emotion, or social interaction. Speak your truth even when it might be rejected. Sit quietly with your feelings instead of distracting yourself. Face memories that hurt without running from them. Practice honesty and confrontation, even when it risks conflict. Each small act of bravery is voluntary discomfort. Each moment you face difficulty and do not collapse strengthens your ability to face the emotional storms of attachment. Fear of pain leads to clinging attachment, often comes from a deep-seated fear, the fear of being without someone. We hold on because we imagine life will be unbearable without them. The truth is, life is always bearable, but the mind must be trained to understand this. Voluntary discomfort acts as a rehearsal. It tells your mind, this is hard, this is uncomfortable, I am capable, I will survive. When real-life emotional hardship arrives, your mind recognizes, I have faced discomfort before, I have endured before, I can endure again. Attachment loses its grip because it feeds on fear, and fear loses its power when you've practiced surviving difficulty. Examples from Stoic practice. The Stoics often practiced voluntary discomfort to prepare for life's inevitable challenges. Here are some examples. Fasting or simple meals. To experience mild hunger and remind oneself that survival does not depend on indulgence. Cold baths or showers. To train the body and mind to endure shock and discomfort. Sleeping on harder surfaces or with minimal comfort. To practice resilience and reduce dependence on luxury. Deliberate exposure to criticism or rejection. To face emotional discomfort without panic. Walking long distances or physical exertion. To condition the mind to endure strain while remaining focused and present. Each of these exercises is a practice in detachment. Detachment from comfort, from fear, and from the illusion that life must always be easy. When you become comfortable with mild suffering, real emotional pain, even losing someone you care about, feels less catastrophic. Voluntary discomfort builds inner freedom. The ultimate goal of voluntary discomfort is not pain itself, but freedom. Freedom comes when you are no longer dependent on external circumstances for your happiness or peace. By voluntarily experiencing discomfort, you remind yourself that life can be challenging, but you are strong enough to face it. You realize that clinging to someone out of fear is unnecessary because you already possess the internal strength to survive, adapt, and thrive. Marcus Aurelius emphasized this repeatedly. If you are distressed by anything external, The pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. By practicing voluntary discomfort, you build the muscle to revoke fear. You train your mind to endure what it once thought unbearable. You strengthen your capacity to detach without resentment, panic, or desperation. Practical steps to practice. Voluntary discomfort. Start small. Take cold showers, skip a meal, or sit quietly without distractions. Face emotional fears. Write your feelings honestly, sit with them, and observe them without judgment. Resist immediate gratification. Delay checking your phone, stop seeking reassurance, or avoid compulsive behaviors. Expose yourself socially. Speak honestly in situations where you fear judgment or rejection. Endure physical challenges, exercise, walk long distances, or practice minimalism in daily comfort. Every small act teaches the mind a universal truth. You are stronger than your fears, and discomfort is survivable. The link to emotional detachment. When the mind is trained through voluntary discomfort, emotional detachment becomes natural. You cling less because you are no longer ruled by fear. You accept that separation, loss, or rejection is uncomfortable, but you can endure it. You no longer need to control someone else to feel safe, because you have trained your mind to find stability within yourself. Voluntary discomfort transforms emotional suffering from a threat into a teacher. It strengthens your resilience, fortifies your independence, and prepares you to navigate life without relying on anyone else for validation, love, or security. Rule 5. Limit exposure to triggers. When someone you care about becomes a source of emotional turmoil, it can feel nearly impossible to regain your balance. Every message, every post, every social media update, every chance encounter becomes a spark that reignites the fire of attachment. The mind fixates, the heart races, the pain returns. And in that instant, all the progress you've made toward detachment can feel like it's slipping away. This is why the Stoics emphasize the importance of limiting exposure to triggers. Emotional triggers are anything, external or internal, that reignites feelings, memories, or attachments you are trying to move beyond. They are the sparks that keep the fire of emotional dependence alive. And until you create some distance from them, detachment is nearly impossible. Physical distance. Physical proximity can reinforce attachment and suffering. Seeing someone in person, being in spaces they occupy, or stumbling upon reminders of them in your daily life can pull you back into old emotional patterns. It doesn't mean avoidance out of bitterness or fear. Instead, it's a conscious choice to create space so your mind can process reality rather than react impulsively. Even Marcus Aurelius, amidst all the chaos of his life, recognized the value of space. He spent hours in solitude, reflecting, journaling, and observing his thoughts without distraction. This physical distance wasn't isolation. It was mental hygiene. It allowed clarity. It allowed him to see things as they were, not as the mind feared or imagined. For you, physical distance might mean avoiding places where you are likely to see reminders of someone you are trying to detach from. It might mean restructuring your routine so that chance encounters are minimized. It is not cruelty, it is self-preservation. Digital distance. In the modern world, triggers are everywhere, especially online. Social media allows constant observation, checking their profile, watching their stories, reading old messages, or seeing pictures that once brought joy. But these glimpses often bring pain now, fueling longing and attachment. Limiting digital exposure is a Stoic principle in action. It is about protecting your mind from unnecessary disturbances. Unfollowing, muting, or temporarily blocking someone isn't an act of hate. It's a strategy of clarity. Your mind cannot detach if it is continuously fed reminders of what it cannot control. Remember, emotional detachment is not about erasing memories or avoiding reality entirely. It's about creating conditions where your mind is no longer overwhelmed by external stimuli that trigger old attachments. Space allows you to rebuild internal strength. Mental distance. Limiting exposure is not only physical or digital, it's also mental. Often, the hardest triggers come from inside your own head. You replay conversations, imagine what could have been, or anticipate future encounters. These self-created triggers are just as powerful as external ones. The Stoics taught the art of mental discipline. Marcus Aurelius frequently reminded himself to return to the present, to observe thoughts without being consumed by them, and to separate what is real from what is imagined. Mental distance is the practice of watching your mind instead of letting your mind watch you. Whenever your thoughts drift towards someone you are trying to detach from, gently remind yourself, this is just a thought. I don't need to react. I don't need to cling. You create a space between stimulus and reaction, weakening the grip of attachment. Why space creates clarity? Distance, in all its forms, allows perspective. When you are too close, physically, digitally, or emotionally, your judgments become clouded by desire, fear, and attachment. Space gives your mind room to breathe. It gives your heart time to heal. It allows you to see the reality of a situation without the fog of longing. With clarity comes wisdom. With wisdom comes the ability to make decisions that align with your values, not your emotions. You no longer cling out of fear. You no longer react impulsively. You respond intentionally. Practical steps to limit triggers. Physical. Avoid places or situations where you might encounter the person. Give yourself permission to step back from shared spaces. Digital. Limit checking profiles, mute social media updates, or even take a temporary break online. Protect your mind from unnecessary stimuli. Mental. Practice mindfulness and journaling to observe thoughts instead of getting lost in them. Recognize when your mind is creating loops of attachment. These steps are not signs of weakness. They are acts of courage. They are deliberate choices to regain control over your mind and emotions. The Stoic mindset. The Stoics understood that attachment often arises from repeated exposure to triggers, external and internal. Emotional pain is amplified when we allow constant reminders to reach us. By limiting exposure, we create a controlled environment for our minds, where rational thought, clarity, and self-mastery can flourish. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Limiting exposure is a practical step in exercising that power. It is not avoidance. It is a strategic choice to reclaim your mental and emotional space. Rule 6. Replace attachment with purpose. One of the most transformative principles of Stoicism is the idea that your energy should always serve your purpose, not your attachments. When you are emotionally attached to someone, a large portion of your energy, attention, and mental resources is consumed by thoughts of them, what they said, how they feel, what they might do, and how it affects you. This preoccupation drains your vitality, clouds your judgment, and keeps you from living fully. Marcus Aurelius, throughout his meditations, repeatedly emphasized the importance of focusing on one's duties and responsibilities. He believed that the mind should be directed toward action, purpose, and service, rather than indulgence in emotional entanglements. Emotional attachment, especially when it becomes obsessive, is a form of distraction from what truly matters in life: your mission, your growth, and your contribution to the world. Attachment drains energy. Think about it. Every hour you spend thinking about someone who is no longer fully present in your life is an hour taken away from your goals, your work, and your personal development. Every message you reread, every memory you replay, every what-if scenario you imagine steals mental bandwidth from the very things that define you. Stoicism teaches that time and energy are finite. Marcus Aurelius warned against letting trivial matters, including unreciprocated emotions or failed relationships, dominate your mind. Instead, he advised turning attention inward toward what is within your control: your actions, your decisions, your work, and your personal growth. When you replace attachment with purpose, you shift your energy from reacting to a person to building yourself, creating, achieving, and living intentionally. Purpose becomes the anchor that stabilizes the mind, allowing it to rise above distraction and emotional turbulence. Purpose, as the antidote to emotional clinging attachment, is often fueled by fear, the fear of loss, loneliness, or the unknown. Purpose acts as the antidote. When you are deeply invested in a mission, goal, or responsibility, you recognize that your fulfillment does not depend on another person. You start measuring your success, your happiness, and your peace by your efforts and achievements, not by someone else's presence or approval. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." This is a call to action. Focus on what you can control, your purpose, rather than what you cannot, someone else's choices or feelings. By doing so, attachment naturally loses its grip. How to shift focus to purpose. Identify your mission. Reflect on what truly matters to you: your work, your personal growth, your health, your contribution to others, or a long-term goal. This is the foundation of your purpose. Create daily action steps. Channel your energy into measurable actions. Each small step toward your goal strengthens your mind and reduces mental space for attachment. Prioritize responsibilities. Whether it's your job, studies, or family obligations, focusing on duties keeps the mind engaged and prevents overthinking. Invest in self-improvement. Learn new skills, adopt better habits, exercise, or meditate. Growth fills the void that emotional dependence once occupied. Serve others. Helping others or contributing to a cause greater than yourself shifts focus away from personal longing toward meaningful impact. When you consistently direct energy toward purpose, your mind stops obsessing over someone else. Your thoughts no longer spin in circles of what if or why me. Instead, they turn toward actionable, constructive, and empowering pursuits. Purpose gives clarity and motivation. Attachment clouds. Clarity. When you're emotionally dependent on someone, every decision, every emotion, every day is filtered through their presence, absence, or behavior. Purpose, on the other hand, provides a guiding framework for life. It allows you to evaluate decisions, prioritize time, and take actions that align with your values rather than your fears. For example, if your purpose is building a career or mastering a skill, moments of longing or sadness no longer dominate your schedule. They become brief interruptions rather than life-defining crises. Your focus on purpose keeps you moving forward, regardless of external circumstances or emotional turbulence. Stoic perspective. You are defined by your actions, not your attachments. The Stoics believed that the measure of a person is in their actions and virtues, not in who they are emotionally attached to. Marcus Aurelius often reflected on the fleeting nature of relationships and the impermanence of external circumstances. He understood that a fulfilled life comes not from clinging to people, but from fulfilling your role, your duties, and your potential. Attachment ties your identity to someone else, creating dependency and vulnerability. Purpose ties your identity to yourself, your actions, and your impact. One leads to instability. The other leads to resilience, clarity, and peace. Practical ways to replace attachment with purpose. Morning ritual. Begin each day with a clear intention. Today, I will focus on my purpose. Visualize your goals, tasks, and responsibilities. Time blocking. Allocate blocks of time for work, study, health, and self-improvement. Keep distractions, including thoughts of someone you're detaching from, out of these blocks. Reflect on progress. End each day by reviewing what you accomplished toward your purpose. Celebrate small wins to reinforce your focus. Reframe attachment. When you feel a pull towards someone emotionally, ask yourself, how does dwelling on this help me fulfill my purpose? The answer is often, it doesn't. Then redirect energy to action. Engage in meaningful projects. Whether it's a creative pursuit, volunteering, or professional development, immerse yourself in activities that bring fulfillment beyond relationships. The result, emotional freedom. By replacing attachment with purpose, you reclaim your time, energy, and mental space. You no longer allow someone else's presence, absence, or choices to define your emotional state. Your mind is occupied with action, growth, and contribution. Your heart finds fulfillment in progress, achievement, and meaningful living. In essence, purpose becomes the anchor that prevents emotional turbulence from pulling you under. Attachment loses its power, and emotional detachment becomes a natural outcome. Rule 7. Reframe loss as liberation. One of the most profound shifts in Stoic thinking is the ability to reframe loss as liberation. When someone leaves your life, or when a connection ends, the instinctive reaction is to feel abandoned, hurt, or defeated. The mind often whispers, I lost them, I failed, I am incomplete. But Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics teach us to challenge this narrative entirely. Instead of seeing loss as deprivation, they invite you to see it as a return to yourself. Instead of lamenting what is gone, you recognize what has been regained: your freedom, your peace, your autonomy, your ability to focus on your life without distraction. Emotional detachment begins when you shift your perspective from victimhood to empowerment. Why loss? Feels like defeat attachment convinces us that our value, happiness, or security depends on someone else. When that person is gone, the brain interprets it as a threat. It triggers sadness, fear, and a sense of emptiness. This is natural, but Stoicism emphasizes that the pain comes not from the loss itself, but from the story we tell about it. Saying I lost them implies that your happiness was dependent on them, that your completeness was tied to their presence. It places your identity outside yourself, in the hands of another. And as Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not external events. The key is to reclaim that power by reframing your narrative. Loss is not the end. It is a beginning. When a relationship ends, a friendship fades, or someone moves away, it creates space. Space for clarity, space for growth, space to rediscover yourself. The Stoics believed that every ending in life is an opportunity for inner realignment. Instead of focusing on what you no longer have, focus on what has been returned to you: your time, your mental energy, your autonomy. You are no longer navigating your life around someone else's whims, emotions, or decisions. You are free to prioritize yourself, your goals, and your growth. Reframing loss as liberation transforms emotional suffering into empowerment. It allows you to see endings not as punishments, but as gifts disguised in discomfort. The power of perspective. Imagine two people experiencing the same breakup. The first says, I lost them, my life is ruined. The second says, I regained myself. I am free to focus on what truly matters. Both experience the same event, yet their internal worlds are entirely different. The first remains trapped in grief, resentment, and longing. The second moves forward with clarity, strength, and self-possession. This is the essence of Stoic reframing. Your interpretation of events dictates your emotional reality. The external loss is neutral. It is your judgment of it that creates suffering or liberation. Practical ways to reframe loss. Pause and observe. When feelings of loss arise, acknowledge them without judgment. Recognize the discomfort, but do not let it dominate your mind. Ask, what have I gained? Identify what is regained: freedom, time, peace, or focus. Shift your attention to these positives. Practice journaling. Write down the losses, and next to each, write what it has returned to you. This helps solidify a new narrative. Focus on yourself. Reinvest the energy you spent on attachment into growth, hobbies, learning, or your goals. Repeat the reframe daily. Every time thoughts of the past resurface, remind yourself, I regained myself. Over time, this becomes instinctive. Freedom comes from detachment. Emotional attachment binds your happiness to another's presence or approval. Reframing loss as liberation breaks these chains. It allows you to reclaim your inner peace and autonomy. You are no longer at the mercy of someone else's choices. You are whole, independent, and capable of thriving on your own. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." This is the Stoic mindset of liberation. Loss is inevitable in life. Relationships end, people change, circumstances shift. But your ability to detach, reframe, and reclaim yourself is invincible. When you internalize this perspective, loss becomes less about deprivation and more about opportunity. Each ending becomes a chance to focus on your growth, to strengthen your resilience, and to live fully on your own terms. Your path to emotional freedom. Emotional attachment can feel like a silent chain, weighing down your mind, heart, and soul. It pulls you toward the past, toward imagined fears, toward dependency on someone else's presence or approval. But as the Stoics remind us, freedom isn't found in avoiding attachment entirely. It's found in mastering your mind, observing your emotions, and reclaiming your power. The first 7 rules: accepting what you cannot control, observing your emotions without becoming them, stopping the stories your mind creates, practicing voluntary discomfort, limiting exposure to triggers, replacing attachment with purpose, and reframing loss as liberation, are more than just strategies. They are a blueprint for emotional resilience, a guide to thriving in life without letting others dictate your inner peace. By following these principles, you stop being a passenger on the waves of emotion and become the calm, steady observer who can navigate life with clarity and strength. You learn that pain is temporary, loss is not defeat, and freedom is always within your grasp. Ultimately, these rules teach a timeless Stoic truth. You are not defined by others, nor by your emotions. You are defined by how you choose to respond. Every moment you practice detachment is a moment you reclaim yourself. Every challenge you endure is a chance to grow stronger. Every loss reframed becomes liberation. Step into this mindset, and you don't just survive life's hardships. You rise above them, unshaken, empowered, and free.